Okay, I would like to thank you all for attending the October 4th Planning Commission of Lakewood City. Madam Secretary, would you please take the roll?
Mr. Baker?
Here.
Mr. Gatos?
Here.
Mr. McMahon?
Here.
Ms. Rossiter?
Here.
Mr. Coyne?
I'd like to ask a motion to excuse Mr.
Motion to excuse Mr. Coyne.
I'll second.
All for it?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. Very good. Opening remarks from the city, please.
Good evening and welcome to the Lakewood Planning Commission meeting. The commission is made up of 5 members charged with evaluating proposals as required by Lakewood's zoning code and the community vision. The charter of the city establishes the authority of the commission and that it shall be made up of 5 members. Members of the commission are volunteer Lakewood residents appointed to 6-year terms by the mayor and city council. Please be respectful in your conversations with them. Tonight, the commission shall hear testimony from each applicant making presentation for their docket item. The commission may also take public comment for each docket item, and public commentary shall only address that specific docket item being considered. Public comment shall be limited to 3 minutes per person. We will raise a yellow card when you have 1 minute remaining, and a red card will be raised when your time has expired. While you are welcome to state your agreement with prior commentary that has been made, please make an effort to provide new comments you find relevant to the commission, as time is limited and the commission welcomes a variety of viewpoints and diversity of information. You may submit statements, feelings, concerns in writing to the secretary to have them included as a matter of public record. Anyone addressing the commission tonight will please sign the oath and state your name and address for the record prior to addressing the commission.
Thank you. Having missed the meeting for a month, I've forgot my talent for following the agenda. So I'd like a motion to approve the minutes of the September 6th, 2018.
Mr. Chair, there are just a couple small changes to those minutes. There was a typo with a strike-through on it, and it incorrectly noted that we had waived the opening remarks, which we had not done. I believe those changes have been made. So with those changes made, I'll move to approve the minutes from last meeting.
Very good. I was not there, so I'll recuse myself.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you. Okay, Mr. McMahon asked if he can make a couple comments before we...
Briefly, fellow commissioners and everyone here in attendance, on October 23rd and other times going into the rest of this year and the beginning of the new year, one of the very important land use things that's going to happen for Lakewood is that we're going to be developing a final integrated wet weather improvement plan that will be submitted to EPA by March 1st. Now, this is a plan that on how Lakewood has to update all of its sewers to meet the requirements of the Clean Water Act. We have a good functioning sewer system, but it's an antiquated design, and it's going to be pervasive around the city, of the streets that are impacted, and some very large capital projects that are coming. So I know the Planning Commission's invited, but anybody who's interested in Lakewood land use and what the city looks like, this is an opportunity to not only look at what it will take to comply with the Clean Water Act, but what opportunities does this create. So I invite all of us to, we're invited to participate because what else can we do? Instead of just trying to get bigger sewer pipes in the ground, what other opportunities does this create for new things that should be in this city, that new opportunities at the lakefront, at parks, at, with streets? It needs some creative thinking, and it needs it now from the citizenry, so we can take that and negotiate that with EPA. So it's just an invitation on October 23rd in this room. The task force, the Clean Water Task Force and this Planning Commission will be meeting. There'll be another meeting in November. There'll be a general public meeting in December and one in January, and then council will act and will submit a plan on March 1st. And you're going to hear an awful lot about sewers, and hopefully not a lot of awful things about sewers, but a lot, because we're talking hundreds of millions of dollars over the next decades facing the city. So it's an invitation to everybody here to be actively involved.
Thank you so much, Mr. McMahon. And, for you that don't know, that's Mr. McMahon's business is an environmental attorney, and we're so blessed to have him involved in our city for sure. Okay, old business, conditional use, docket number 092518, and we're also going to speak of 092618 and 092718 at the same time. This,
Yeah, Mr. Chair, Raising Cane's Chicken Fingers has requested a deferral tonight. They have not completed a traffic study, which is a major component of the approval and review of this project. As we heard from everyone at the last meeting, traffic is one of the main concerns. So we are waiting for their traffic study, which should be done at the end of October, and we will spend our November meeting discussing the traffic study. But they have requested a deferral.
very good. So I would make a motion to defer dockets number 092518, 092618, and 092718. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay. All for?
Aye.
Against? Motion passes. Thank you. Conditional use, I'm sorry, planning development, item 7, docket number 092818, 14519 Detroit Avenue, 1 Lakewood Place. Mr. Commissioner?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I'd be happy to introduce this project to the commission tonight as Caitlin makes her way up to the podium. Thanks again for having this on the docket tonight. This is our second Planning Commission meeting on the 1 Lakewood Place project. Before we get started tonight, I wanted to recognize our partners at Carnegie Development Corporation, George Papandreas, Rustum Corey, and David Parrish from RDL Architects. As we talked about in our pre-meeting, we had a very busy September about this project. We kicked off the 1 Lakewood Place project in this very room with Planning Commission, had a lot of thoughtful dialogue with Commission, also with members of the public. The following Wednesday, we had an opportunity to be in front of the Lakewood Alive board and their design review committee, which was a little over 40 people at the library. That particular group, as you guys know, is in charge of our downtown Main Street program and has a great pulse on what's happening in our downtown district. So we took an opportunity to go share the project details with that group. In that room, we did a workshop style, so we had groups of about 10 or 12 people kind of drawing on plans, helping us understand what they were thinking about. A lot of good feedback came out of that room. And then the following night, Thursday night, we were back in this room in front of the Architectural Board of Review, talking a little bit more about design and architecture, site layout, and also had an opportunity to hear from members of the public that night. So the first thing, so the commission's aware and members of the public are aware, we've posted those minutes to our website, onelakewood.com/downtown development. The minutes from Planning Commission, ABR, and Lakewood Alive are all on there. There's also videos of the Planning Commission and ABR meetings. In case people aren't able to make the meetings, they can have access to the conversations that we had. Tonight, Mr. Chair, what we wanted to spend time on is related to some specific topics that are in Chapter 1156, our Plan Development Zoning chapter, and on topics that have come up a lot in the last 30 days. The feedback we got was there's a high volume of it, and it was very rich. So RDL has been spending the last month creating some updates to its plans. And while it was doing that, we wanted to take tonight as an opportunity to talk about context. Last month, we were looking at just the plan sets and talking about setback ranges and heights of buildings on the site, but we really were only focused on that 5.7 acres. What Caitlin is going to do tonight is show us some context of the surrounding 4 or 5 block neighborhood. What does the built environment look like around that district? Heights of buildings, setbacks of buildings, and how those examples sort of integrate with the neighborhood and how this project needs to take cues from the neighborhood. In addition to that, we spent some time touring some public spaces in the region to help us better understand what a half-acre community gathering space looks like at the corner of Bell and Detroit. So Caitlin's going to walk through some examples of some projects in other cities that you can go visit. One of our primary objectives tonight is to show what we think are good examples to pull from, but they're also places that you can visit and then bring feedback back on. And so that we're not just responding to plans on paper, we can go see built examples and have that inform the design, the land use of this project. At the end of this, Mr. Chair, we'll circle back to the code. To be clear, we are requesting a deferral tonight. We will not request a vote on this, but I did want to bring us back to the code at the end of Caitlin's presentation. George and Rustam and David will be available at any point if you guys have specific questions about the project, and then of course we'll be anxious to hear from members of the public too. So Caitlin, with that, I will turn it over to you.
Like Russ mentioned, I'm Caitlin, and I'm a city planner with the City of Lakewood. Wanted to provide some analysis and context and an overview of what we've been thinking about in the planning department. Last meeting, Mike Malinsky discussed this focus moving forward, 4 points that we want to focus on to make sure that we have a successful project and work with our partners at Carnegie on looking at proposed uses, scale and space, surfaces, and public space. And we'll be talking about 3 of those today. The first will be scale and space, thinking about lot coverage, setbacks, building-to-building setbacks, and setbacks from the property line, heights of the buildings and the surrounding heights in the neighborhoods, and then also public space sizing. The first was shown at the last meeting, but looking at it more closely, the existing building coverage is 51% of the site, and the proposed building coverage is slightly larger than this at 57%, but you can see that the existing building plus hardscape, which includes the parking lots that are at the hospital, is 81%, and the final existing building and hardscape with this project actually decreases to 78%. So there is an overall reduction in that impervious area with this project and the coverage on the site. Looking at some setbacks on the site, these are shown as building-to-building setbacks, and these are existing today with the hospital building. You can see as you go down from Detroit, the commercial area, to the residential area, these setbacks generally do get further apart, building to building. So 83 up by the Family Health Center, 168 feet from these houses on Bell. And then we have 60 feet from the Marlowe commercial building to the apartments across the street, 84 feet from the hospital to the single-family homes, and 80 feet in this section. When we look at the proposed ranges on the site plan, these are fairly similar to what we have today, but there is a range. So this went from around 80 to 70 to 90 feet. This increased to about 200 feet based on the driveway area that it's across from. This ranges from 77 to 87 feet on the southern portion, 77 to 97 feet across from this commercial building, and then 60 to 80 feet across from the apartments. These are the ranges that were provided from the building line. So the commercial could range from 0 to 20 feet off the property line for the commercial buildings. The residential has a range of 0 to 10 feet of setback. And then the buffer from the residential zone, the side yard setback, is 5 feet. As an example that we thought related and provided good context for something that's built closer to the street but still integrates into the neighborhood is the Rockport project along Hopkins Avenue. These have a 3.5-foot setback that steps back a little bit to a 7-foot setback before it goes into the single-family homes. And it provides a nice transition that feels comfortable on the street. The existing area heights, This is our downtown district, so we have our tallest building in the city in this district, which is Center North, which is 15 stories, 180 feet. The westerly is also just to the east of this site, and that is 11 stories at 121 feet. So those are the two tallest existing buildings. And then we have the Family Health Center next door, which is 3 stories and 40 feet. We have the INA building as well, which is 7 stories and about 90 feet. Center West is very similar at 7 stories and 90 feet. And then the southwesterly is 6 stories and 60 feet. So this is a little bit more of a dense downtown district than some of our other neighborhoods. The hospital itself has several different additions and sizes as you go through. The front portion is approximately 50 feet tall. The central portion is approximately 70 feet tall. And then some of these shorter buildings along the edge, they're about 2 stories. That's 30 feet in height. And then all of our residential districts are approximately 35 feet, which is the maximum height of a residential building in Lakewood. Looking at the proposed heights, the building furthest to the north is 2 stories at about 40 feet, stepping up a little bit to 6 stories and 100 feet, still quite a bit less than the Center North building across the street. Then it's stepping down again to a 4-story building. This is the garage with the liner units. There are 7 garage levels, but one is actually underneath the ground. So that's 50 feet. And then there's a 9-story apartment back here, which is 90 feet tall. And then these liner units about 35 feet and 3 stories. Looking at this section just helps provide some context that the office building really is at about the same elevation as the apartment buildings. You can see also on the bottom the change in grade as we go through the site. It's about 20 feet difference from the back of the site to the front. And then you can also see the garage with the bottom level being underground. For the public space, the existing green space, which isn't very functional, is 0.35 acres in front of the old hospital building. This project is proposing to step the building back and provide a ½ acre of public space in front of the office building. Trying to think of what ½ acre means is kind of difficult sometimes, so putting it in context with our list of parks, one Lakewood Place public space would be about half of Merle or Niagara Park, to give some idea of space. St. Charles Green across the street is 1.3 acres, so this would be slightly less than half of St. Charles Green. And then that plaza in front of Center North across the street is 0.2 acres, so this is a little bit more than twice the size of Center North Plaza. Again, providing some areas around here that you could go visit and get a feel for how big this space might be. At Lorraine and West 25th Street across from the West Side Market is Market Square Park. That is a ½ acre site, so it's a good place to go visit and see what you like and what you don't like about the space, what works well and what does not work well. But it's a good comparison with the surrounding buildings as well. Perk Park is another great example in Cleveland of a successful park. It is 1 acre in size, so our site would be approximately half of Perk Park. It's at Walnut and East 12th Street. And then Toby's Plaza at Euclid and Mayfield Road, right by Mocha. That's about 0.85 acres. And that's another interesting mix of uses in an urban plaza. For the public space, we really wanted to focus on the function and feel of that, and we visited some of these areas to try and figure out what makes a public space successful, thinking about the mix of hardscape versus softscape, the programming, the seating, materials that are used, how you would deal with an elevation change that we'll have in front of our buildings, and then also lighting of the space. So Perk Park again, it does have a great mix of hardscape and softscape. You'll see the large grassy field area with the surrounding concrete. And then there's this kind of in-between between hardscape and softscape with this graveled cinder area with some grassy planting areas. So there's quite a mix of hard and softscape that makes this a successful public space. Using Perk Park as an example again, and thinking about those elements that we've been studying, we went down there during Walnut Wednesday, and they do a really good job of programming that space. So you'll see there's space for food trucks along the side of it, places for people to queue. There was a place for someone to set up to play a little concert for people who are eating. So thinking about some of those uses and programming as we design our space will be important, because programming really is a critical element to these public spaces. The other thing we noticed is the seating diversity in this picture. We have 6 different types of seating all in one park. So we have low concrete walls that people can sit on, seats with a small table between them so people can eat, wooden benches with footrests, metal benches. We have picnic tables and other low seating on the other side. So there's quite a mix of seating types and directions for people to feel comfortable. There's also a good change of materials on the site. So you'll see grass, concrete, there's pavers in this section. There's that cinder material, the gravel material along the lighting, and then also this plank material under this structure. They also have to deal with a bit of a change of elevation in this park, and they do so fairly effectively with these stairs and then ramps as well. And they have great lighting design. So even when you go by at night, the park is lit. You can see into it, feels safe. And they're not just giant lights shining down on it. They're nicely designed lights. For the surfaces, the rhythm and texture that we're looking for, we really are going to focus on the edges of the site. We have edges that face different uses, so we have the commercial edges and then the neighborhood edges that we want to think about, and how rhythm, texture, and landscape can help soften those edges. So for this northern portion along our commercial buildings, we would look to our commercial design guidelines for guidance, which is a list of goals for our commercial areas. Down Bell and Marlowe, we would look for that neighborhood feel using texture and massing to create a nice neighborhood look for all the single-family surrounding houses. And then on the southern portion, we would look to have a hard edge to block any views and light from the surrounding houses. So that could be a wall or a fence, but something with a hard edge. The commercial design guidelines, these are 5 of the goals. The first is think pedestrian first, place activity on the street, minimize the impact of parking and vehicles, compatibility with the historic context, and the quality of design. So these are all of the things we'd be thinking about for that commercial portion of the project. For surfaces and the rhythm along the street, this rhythm is really created by the front porches and the houses going down the street. This is a little bit larger scale, but it still has that break between the buildings and the rhythm of the buildings as they progress down the street. And then also there could be rhythm by repetition, such as at McKinley Place, which RDL was involved in. The surfaces, many of our old houses have this texture that's created by massing, so you'll see all these different roofline and elements that create the texture on this house. You can also do that with the masonry, so this brickwork provides texture on this brick building. And this is a mix of both the change in siding and the massing with the dormers on this house. Also thinking about landscape, so it's not all about just the setbacks in the buildings, but also providing space for large trees to grow and then having well-maintained plantings in front of any units that would be there, as well as the public space. So really thinking about how landscape fits into the overall project. And I think I'll give it back to Bryce.
Thanks, Caitlin. So, Mr. Chair, what we wanted to do is quickly just go over the code section, and then I'd like to turn it over to Planning Commission for feedback, questions, concerns, and we can invite our partners from Carnegie and RDL to join us, and then we can open it up for public comment. So, Mr. Chair, the first step of the plan development zoning process is the preliminary plan approval. The code section that's relevant here is 115604C. This is ultimately the first vote that Planning Commission would take, and it would be to make a recommendation to the director to approve with conditions, or deny the application based on the section 1156.03. And that's really the guidance for this first vote. And so, again, to be very clear, tonight's item will be deferred. But looking forward to the coming months, it's 1156.03 that we should pay attention to. Focus areas in that code section are related to lot size, floor area ratio, structure heights, residential setbacks, building line setbacks, and circulation. What the preliminary plan vote does is it unlocks Chapter 1156.05, which is the design review chapter. It essentially explains getting into building materials, landscaping. It essentially allows us to put the next level of detail on the project. Modifications can be made to the preliminary plan after you vote on it. So it's really 1156.03 that we're going to be guided by, and the topics that are in that section. Once we get to 1156.05, which would be after the preliminary plan vote, we'd be able to talk about things more in depth in building and site design, building materials, as I mentioned, pedestrian access and circulation, parking, streetscape improvements, lighting, all of those things. We've been touching on some of them as this first part, just to help explain the project. Carnegie and RDL will be back next month to elaborate on some of these things, but we really need to get past the preliminary plan approval in order to really dive deep into each of these topics. And so this would be a part of the final PD review. Of course, your peer board, the Architectural Board of Review, has the exact same process step. They have a preliminary plan vote. They also have a final plan vote. And then that entire package would be delivered to City Council for consideration. So, Mr. Chair, that's all that we had prepared tonight. I'd like to turn it over back to Planning Commission to see if you guys have any questions or dialogue.
Anyone on the board have questions, comments?
A couple questions, Mr. Chair. Just very small clarifying questions. In your presentation, Kate, when you talked about St. Charles Green, just for comparison's sake, for that you drew that from the railroad tracks all the way to the parking garage, right? And just for clarity, that's not St. Charles Green, or it's not all city property, and it's not a park, and it's not a whole lot of things, but just for perspective.
Right.
Right, it's an
Just-
open lot for perspective,
Just
is
for
1.3
perspective, for the
acres.
visual of the green space
Very good.
itself, not looking at boundary lines.
Just want to make sure we're all very clear on
Yeah.
that. And then when you had the percentage of the building, the hardscape under the current hospital site versus otherwise, did you include the front yard, the 0.35 acres of the grass? Is that hardscape?
I might look to RDL on that, but I don't believe that was included as hardscape. Which part of it could be?
And I'll just
I don't know.
say, I mean, if you're really tabulating numbers, that particular green space has never really been used for anything, and it's not really usable, and it's not impervious, or it's not pervious in the way that you would want to absorb anything. It's covering up underground storage tanks, and it was just a grass cover over it. So it has the feel of being green space, but it's not functional green space. So that number's probably a little low if that was included as green. It's really hardscape that happens to have grass on it.
I have a question. Was the public square included in the hardscape or the green space? 'Cause I didn't think it was determined what type of design was going to be at that.
I believe for that analysis, it was not included in the hardscape,
So it could potentially be significantly more.
potentially. Portions of it.
Any other comments?
Yeah, to the point, this public letter we got from Peter Ketter, he does, of all the kind of edges of the site, the one on Marlow, kind of on the north end, where you have the single-family housing coming together with the apartment, coming together with the retail and the house on top, I think the design team should be very careful about how that looks and how that feels. I know we're not quite there yet, but I think from a height perspective and kind of blending in, I think that's the pinch point on the site. And then also the southern portion with light pollution and kind of headlights going through, but it sounds like, fences, just make sure those materials protect those property owners from a lot of that light. But I think that's the toughest part of the site, as far as blending use. Now Lakewood, right, we have commercial next to residential a lot, but it's tough to also a lot of it.
Anything else?
Kyle, you're talking about.
You're talking about this section right here,
Yeah, basically that,
where it starts to go up.
yeah,
that
where
commercial
you're
component.
getting the height, but you're across the street from single family. That'd be the northeast portion.
Any other comments?
So I know this might be a little bit early to give this comment, but I guess my biggest concern is, right now, is the 5-foot setback at the southern portion of the site. I just think that that's something that needs to be addressed, obviously not now, but in the future.
To clarify, your point is that it's too small?
Yeah.
Okay, too small.
So just, Monica, picking up some relief on this southern edge, either with landscaping or something else that maybe softens that? Is that what you're thinking?
Yeah, or increasing the setback, in addition to providing some landscaping and screening.
Now, those are residential townhouses. They're correct, Mr.
Bottom.
Commissioner?
I believe
Bottom?
they're 3-story walk-up units.
Okay.
So there's more than one unit.
And do you think those could potentially have like a patio on the 3rd floor, or that's probably hasn't been discussed yet? Or maybe it has.
No, that's a great question, Monica. We can invite Carnegie up to help us with that. I'm not sure that they're that far along yet. It's a good question, though.
Well, it's very important for us to get the questions out, like you said.
Yeah,
to
for
have-
sure.
To deal with those. Well, with the commission complete with questions, I would very much like to invite the public up to present any comments. If you would kindly sign your name in and state your address for us, and You're welcome. The man that needs no introduction.
My name is Carl Orban. I live at 11852 Lake Avenue. I know quite a few of you from, and I served on the architectural board. I guess I was excited about this plan right from the very beginning and still am. The residential piece of it is what I'd like to talk to or ask some questions about tonight is that's where the rest of Lakewood connects with this project. So especially on that southern border there, I would kind of urge that those people particularly have an input as to how that border looks between them. Rather than putting up that standard stockade fence that we do so often, it sort of separates that project from the rest of Lakewood, where it says, stop, this, you don't belong here, or now a more visible fence or an invisible fence allows them to connect as you would if you lived there, if it was always there. So you can pick up from each other. And yes, there are probably two different lifestyles that are going to be in this area, but that promotion of being able to connect with the rest of the city. And that's what I loved about the whole flow of this. It starts from that very, very public space on the corner. It moves to a commercial space. It moves to a light residential, and then it moves to that very heavy residential that belongs with the rest of the city. So I was excited about the project. I just concerned that we should probably get some more involvement from those people, specifically knock on their door type thing where you say, come on, come to the meeting, let's talk. And then the sky's the limit. What would you like to see? And then let's find out what we can do for you. So that's my comment.
No, I mean, I agree with you. I think, having a form of a homogenic flow of the residential use to that point is really important. Thank you very much, Mr.
Okay.
Orban.
Thank you.
Anyone else? That's okay. Come on
I
up.
live at 1496 Marlowe. My name is Tony Colma. I'll put my address in a minute. I live on the southern edge of this project, on the Marlowe side, the third house down, very bottom screen. That's my house. And putting up like a 10-foot, 20-foot fence, would it actually make it seem like
Ma'am, could
there's
you
all
s-
the rich people? Yeah. There's all us sitting over here.
Ma'am,
Yes.
ma'am, can you speak into the microphone?
Okay, I'm sorry. It would make it seem very divisive. We all have fences around our yards because most of us have dogs, but they're 4 feet high or they're 6 feet high. And you can peek out of your bedroom window and see what people are doing in their backyard. If you don't like that about Lakewood, don't move here. Because we know whether their kids are swimming in their pool next door because you can hear them and you can know what songs their kids like on the radio because you can hear them. And that's what I like about Lakewood. And if you're going to put up a 10-foot fence, I'm moving. Because that's not the neighborhood I live in. I want it to look like it fits in the neighborhood. I want the houses that you're building to have peaked roofs. I want the houses to look like, my house is 103 years old. I want this facility to look like it's going to be welcomed here in another 103 years because my house is still going to be there. That's just my opinion.
Thank you so much. That is very good comments and very germane to what we're just talking about, for sure. Anyone else? State your name, please, and speak into the microphone.
Hi, my name's Ben Hockenhall. I'm at 1492 Marlowe. I'm one house away from Tony, actually next door neighbors. The thing that really stood out to me when the city was reviewing the existing heights of other buildings in the area is that most of those very tall buildings were located along Detroit.
Along
And-
what, please?
Along Detroit,
Okay, could you speak into the microphone?
yes. That all of the very tall buildings were really located along Detroit. And if you look there 121 feet along Detroit, 180 feet along Detroit, 90 feet along Detroit, 60 feet along Detroit. And then the proposed development is 90 feet in the heart of a residential area. That seems out of proportion to the existing area. And I think that there should be serious consideration made to changing that in some way. Maybe perhaps moving the taller structure closer to Detroit and stepping things down significantly as you get deeper into the neighborhood. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Anyone else? Yes? Oh.
Hi, my name is Nicole Shedden, and we're just stair-stepping from Tony to Ben to me. I'm that very first house. And two things. I'd like to echo Ben's point. I thought it was very well put. And also, I was thinking about, in terms of the land grade, as we're going up the hill, 100 at street level is actually shorter than 90 at mid-block level, or very close to the same. But in terms of, it's the same thing, 190. That building is essentially as tall as the one on the street level. You're replacing a 30-foot structure with a 90-foot structure, which for the neighbors is obviously an enormous change. If you were to go back one slide, that 9-story section is the 30-foot section of the hospital, and 70-foot doesn't have any neighbors. That looks across to the Women's Health Center. So residential-wise, it is a huge, sore thumb. The other comment, I think, is about that 5-foot barrier on the south end. I am that south end. That driveway is my driveway. My children play there and hit balls over the fence into the neighbor's yard. So where I understand Tony's point about not wanting to have a separation between the rich people and the regular people, maybe there's an opportunity to discuss where that wall begins, not necessarily between house and house. I don't want to have a 10-foot wall between my house and the house next to me, but certainly I don't want my children hitting the ball over the fence into a street, which right now is what's going to happen. So there has to be some kind of room for a separation, because my house is next to a street now, even with a 5-foot setback, and I didn't buy a house on the corner. So it's not that I moved in knowing that was kind of what the deal was moving into 1488. And then one last point about third-floor patios. I realize that there are a lot of areas in Lakewood that have up-down doubles, and there are people that hang out on their second-floor patio because that's where they live. But on this block of Marlowe and Bell, we don't have that. We all have first-floor porches, the way a lot of Lakewood is. And if you put someone on a third-floor porch, then they're not my neighbor, because I can't walk up to their porch and say hi. Hey, up, oh, am I invited up? Nope, not through your house. Okay, we won't be friends then, if I can't go through your house to go up to your patio. So just an architectural consideration that it just doesn't fit on this particular street. We don't have any up-down doubles. It's all single-family first-floor porches. So that's all.
Thank you so much. Anything else?
No, that's it for now. Next month, I'm
really
sure.
appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Anyone else? No? Okay, well, I'll close the public comment. And I'd like to invite the applicant to the podium.
I have a quick question. So I don't think that the setbacks were shown from the liners on the southern portion of the site between the distance between the houses and the liners. Do you know what that is? Yeah.
Yeah, actually, that's something I was going to address. By the way, members of commission, great seeing you. Good evening. Thank you for allowing me to be here tonight. And Bryce and Caitlin, you did a terrific job. I thought that was a great way to start and understand the contextual character of this project and its surrounding environs. One of the things that was brought up, and I thought it was important to point out.
Would you lift the microphone up a little bit more?
Sure,
Speak into it more?
sure, absolutely. One of the things that I thought was important that was brought up here is this setback along the southern border. While these units that line Bell and Marlowe are kind of zero lot lines, this most southern unit actually is contextually the space between the adjacent home and the face of that particular unit is very similar, equal to, or probably greater than what is typical along the entire street. And you can correct me if I'm wrong on that, David, but I think it's important to put that into context so that you don't feel like it's really right on top of you. It's the same kind of rhythm that exists all up and down the street between all the individual homes. So from that perspective, I think that's an important point. The other one is those two that are obviously in the center now have a significant setback and are not even, are probably, what, 40, 50, 60 feet? And that even further sets back that kind of integration of the southern end of the residential as it relates to the surrounding homes. So we were very sensitive about that, and we certainly appreciate all the comments, and we want to try and address them. But that was remember, we're just at the massing stage here, and a lot of the comments that were brought up here tonight deal with us going to the next phase, and we are certainly taking them into consideration. But from a massing point of view, we felt that this contextually really did relate to some of these surrounding setbacks that are typical in the environment in the neighborhood. And I think that's represented pretty well by some of the things that Caitlin had set forth here tonight. I would be interested to know, because I didn't see that statistic, what the setbacks are between the homes. I don't think you brought that up, but I think it would be important so that people can have an understanding of the relationships of what their neighbors really are about. That's something I think that will help them relate and understand to what's happening, as was brought up earlier, what's happening with the adjacent neighbor. So we really are excited about taking it to the next phase, understanding exactly what the context is. There was a comment, I think, also about what is going on up at the northeastern corner in relationship to the office component. We certainly are sensitive to that. And I think from a point of view of dealing with scale, dealing with the massing, dealing with the textures, the materials, the types of things that make what Lakewood is, hopefully we'll get to the point where we can address those concerns adequately.
Good. Any other questions for developer?
Mr. Chair, I did want to note the letter from Peter Ketter was given to each one of you. I know Kyle referenced it already, but that will be added to the meeting minutes as a matter of record.
I just wanted to get a clarification on one thing. So, and again, ma'am, I'm sorry. You're the closest home. You seem to infer that that you didn't buy a corner house. You didn't want to be a corner house. I just want to make sure that's not. There's no drive-through there.
No.
No,
there's no drive-through there. Absolutely not.
Go ahead. Yeah. Yes, please. I just want to feel comfortable with your concern.
Yeah, and the concern, and I could go up and point, but I know I won't be on microphone, is it's not the houses going in next to me, not at all. And certainly I don't want to say, get those houses 15 feet from my house. That's not at all what we're trying to accomplish here. The point is that if you look at where the back of the house is, and then, oh yeah, so these two houses, I mean, it's the same for us, although I know that the gentleman behind us doesn't have children, so it's less, he uses his yard for very different purposes than we use our yard. We use this really nice term that it's a driveway or it's a throughway for all of the townhouses, but that's a street for all of those townhouses. And so they're not alongside my house, but alongside my driveway behind my house and next to my garage. That's a street. So, I mean, I can go point and circle it if you want.
Would you?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, well, that's fine. That clarified very much. Thank you.
Hi, David Parrish. Just wanted to comment on some of the things, some fantastic comments from everyone. We really appreciate it. It's a real, I love this business. You know, really good planning and really good design is something that's very important to us. And your comments are very well taken. It's real interesting to listen to people's individual concerns. Growing up in Lakewood, I grew up on Lewis Drive right next to Franklin School. And my entire life was spent, there was a sign that said no hardball playing. Well, what did everybody do? They played hardball and they'd hit it over the fence. Well, you do, I mean, if you're my father, he watched that happen for a few times and the kids go around looking for their ball. Well, after a while, he got really ticked off. He finally would go out there when they'd hit the ball over, he'd take the ball. Then the kids stopped, they didn't like him anymore. So I'm particularly sensitive toward what you're talking about. So we will pay close attention to that. A couple other points was just from some of the other folks was for the plaza, the half-acre plaza, but I really envision a rich mixture of hard and soft surfaces. I think that's really where we're gonna go. Obviously, it has to have enough hard surface to be functional for its intended purpose, but it needs to be soft enough to feel good and not feel too hard. So I wish I could give you a certain percentage today, but that's the spirit of how we're going to approach the design of it. So, the comment on the porches sounds like a little dialogue going on, but to porch or not to porch on the third floor, that is the question. We'll pay attention to that. But I really think we're really trying to be great neighbors with the three-story. We call them the walk-ups, if you will. We'll have a porch on grade and then 2 levels of living above and then parking in the back. So we really want the massing of those to fit right in with the neighborhood, not look like an anomaly, not stick out, but really just feel really good and integrate. That's our design concept. Another lady called this a facility. This will not be a facility. This will not be. To me, a facility is a hospital. It's not going to be a hospital anymore. It's going to be a home. It's going to be a place where people live, where people go to work, where people go get something to eat. It will not be a facility. Some of the massing, again, one of our challenges is to design, a project that's going to be successful in all fronts. And to do that, I think massing is very important. And we're planning to step the building. You're talking about, can we make the taller building? Can we make it lower? And we are working very hard to step the building creatively, so it steps down and to where it meets the neighborhood, but still has the yield that's needed, for the project. So that's something that we're trying to do. And so that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you very much. City, do we have any additional comments?
I think that's it, Mr. Chair. Just to kind of circle us back, maybe to close on the code section, what I'd ask commission members to do is pay attention to 115603 before our next meeting next month. Just to work through a couple of them again. We're talking about things like being sensitive to abutting land uses, complying with the subdivision requirements, mitigating visual impacts, meeting sections of the community vision, talking about lot size, floor area ratio, structure height. And then, of course, we are looping back to 115601, which is the purpose of this entire chapter and can be summarized by stating that any action inside of the plan development zoning needs to meet the community vision. And we'll do our best to bring that in front of the board, but I would also encourage us to use that as a guide and a tool at any point that we're considering a vote. So you can expect that to be a part of the analysis next month, too.
Excellent. Any other comments or concerns from the Planning Commission?
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
I think it's worth noting again the excellent comments that we have and the excellent dialogue, community dialogue that is underway. But again, tonight, the comments are very well taken. They're right on point and make our job easier to receive them. We welcome written comments in advance, too. That always helps because we can digest them faster in advance as well. So I want to thank the members of the public who have come out and commented on this again, because that's how we get a better project.
Excellent, excellent. Well, with that, I would like to then make a motion to defer.
I'll second.
All for?
Aye.
Against? Motion passes. Thank you for everybody's help. And I totally agree with Lou. Thanks for all you folks for coming, because you are the community. I mean, we are a community, and it's very important for us all to work together and be ultimately very happy of what we ultimately have. All right, item 8 on the docket, new business, a communication, docket number 102918, 12650 Detroit Avenue. Michelle is going to give us a presentation about lights.
Mr. Chair, as Michelle's walking up and members of the public are still here, the next meeting on the One Lakewood Place project is next Thursday at 5:30 in this room. This is the Architectural Board of Review. Again, 5:30 next Thursday. It is likely that we'll hear One Lakewood Place at the top of the agenda. I know you guys have very busy lives, so we'll try to hear that early next Thursday again in this room.
All right. Good evening. My name is Michelle Nocta, and I'm a planner here with the City of Lakewood. And I'm here before you tonight to discuss a proposed lighting ordinance. This was brought to our attention about a year ago. Councilman Bullock was exploring this with Legislative Bach, and they'd received some comments from the community, some complaints, and what they discovered was we really didn't have any ordinance that addressed light trespass and glare between properties, particularly from commercial properties to residential or other properties. So as we explored that, what we found was not only did we not have that sort of ordinance, the state of Ohio didn't have it either, but there were other states and communities that had really great model ordinance. The Dark Skies Initiative has put forth worldwide guidelines, and Pennsylvania worked with them, and they have a really good model ordinance. And so that's really what we based our ordinance on. And we thought that was important, that we be in alignment with other ordinances that are coming online across the globe. And we also found that our purpose, which Councilman Bullock brought to our attention, was the same purpose we're seeing in these other communities too. And that purpose is we want to protect neighbors from light trespass and glare. We want to also, when there is a well-designed project, we want to make sure that's protected from light trespass and glare as well, and that people who are walking or driving by are protected as well. So this graphic is just kind of meant to illustrate the different types of light. So when someone installs light on their property, the purpose is usually to light a surface that you're going to walk on or have an activity on, and that's the useful light. There are other light that is created due to the installation. There's the unwanted light, and that's light that spills across property lines, and that's what we call light trespass. And then there's something called a glare zone, and that's like when you're looking at an unprotected bulb, that type of bright light. And so what we learned from Dark Skies Initiative and the model ordinance is that there are ways to reduce glare and light trespass, and a lot of those are directional solutions. So pointing that light straight down, pointing it back at the property that you're trying to illuminate, shielding that glare zone with a piece of metal or plastic that's designed for that purpose. So there are simple solutions. So currently, these new installations, when we have a new project like One Lakewood Place or any other new project, there's a thorough review, and that goes before ABR. The building department looks into it, and we make sure that they're very compliant. But we don't have a way to deal with complaints. There's no current regulation. So when we looked at how would we institute this ordinance, we knew that we had a lot of different types of light that we would need to address. And we wanted to create a code that is really flexible and addressing all of these different types of lighting, parking lot lighting, canopies like you'll see at a gas station, lighting in parks, landscape and architectural lighting. So we wanted to make sure that the code that we created would be easy for everyone to understand, easy to enforce as well. So here's just a few slides. These are examples around town of lighting. This is the parking lot at Dunkin' Donuts. So this is a lighting plan that was well designed. You can see that the surfaces where people drive and walk are well illuminated. You can see that the light is directed down or back at the property. So what you see on the edge is there's little light trespass and very little glare. Well, here's another nice example where the sign is lit, the pedestrian walkway is lit, but there's not a lot of unwanted spill. Sweet Designs, they've lit the building in a nice way, and you can see the signs are lit, so there's little spill. This is a very difficult type of property to light, and in this case what they've done is the lights are recessed, and you can see that it is a very bright light under the canopy where the activity is, but the edges are quite dark, so they've been able to limit a lot of their trespass and glare. This is an older installation that is also compliant, and this is where the sign is well lit in the building. Here's a property where there were some creative solutions. This is the Wingstar property on Detroit, and what you can see is there's a row of lights along the street that are still lit. What you don't see is there was another row of lights further back. So this was a lot that was really overlit, and with the simple solution in the interim was just to turn off a row of those lights. So we were able to work with the property owner and get there. And this is one of those cases that kind of brought to our attention the need for ordinance so that lights would be properly scaled in the future. This is the Barry Buick site. So here you have where some security lights have been installed, and they are pushing out toward the street. They're pointed at the street, so they create a lot of glare, and they're not as effective as they could be. So here's our approach. The light trespass and the glare are the things that we're judging, and we're judging those by the standards of a reasonable person. In most cases, that reasonable person will be a property maintenance inspector in the building department, and this ordinance would be placed in Chapter 13 of the Property Maintenance Code. So this is something that you don't require any special equipment to judge. You just need the cut sheet for the equipment, and you need a person to go out and look and stand at a property where there's a complaint and say, yes, I can see glare, I can see spill, and I can recommend the solution. And we do want property owners to appropriately light their spaces for safety, and we want them also to be aware of the light that spills onto other neighboring properties. We will definitely perform inspections if the need arises, and we'll work with the property owner to abate those conditions. And here are some more of the methods that can be used to mitigate light trespass and glare. Now, these are best practices from Dark Skies Initiative and the Model Ordinance. The first step is to select the appropriate light fixtures from the beginning. And then another simple solution is installing shields or cutoffs to prevent or reduce the glare. Placing the light poles in a position where the light can be directed down or back at the property, restricting the height of the light poles. And in some cases, as in like a sports facility like the high school, one of the solutions can be to use a curfew, because you're going to have tall light poles, they're going to be very bright, but just to make sure that during the sleep hours of the night that those lights are off and other light is used to illuminate the field if necessary for safety. So when this new ordinance is adopted, all lighting that existed prior to the adoption can remain. It's grandfathered in, as it were. But lighting in the future after the ordinance is adopted cannot be altered in any way that would increase its noncompliance. So my questions for Planning Commission tonight are, does it make sense? Basically, what I've said about glare and trespass, you know, I've been really close to this for a long time. Housing committee, we've been really close to it. So I've tried to kind of zoom out and explain glare and trespass, and I wanted to know how effective that is, and if the standard of care of the reasonable person makes sense as a way to enforce this code. So that's my questions for you.
I have one question.
Sure.
How would you determine if someone's lighting was in place before or after the?
We just assume, I mean, at the adoption of the code, everything that exists at that time. So we're not going to go out and inspect every property.
Yeah, but I think, what if someone makes a complaint, you talk to the property owner, and they said, well, this was here before. How is there any proof that the lighting existed?
Oh, I see what you're saying. So it doesn't matter at that point. They'll have to come into compliance if you go and you investigate and there is glare. So what we're saying is everyone in the city won't automatically be cited at the adoption of the code. What would drive that would be somebody complaining about a fixture, if that makes sense.
So my observation is, I mean, certainly in new construction, new renovations, things of that nature, all of this would be taken into consideration. In my industry, this is called external obsolescence, okay? Externalities and acting, whatever. We have the most densely populated community, as you all know, in Ohio and between New York and Chicago, and probably, except for maybe the Clifton Park market and maybe part of the Lake Edgewater corridor, the rest of the city is impacted by many externalities. Could be noise pollution, light pollution, whatever. I think we have to be judicious about existing things and you know, not have the light police, you know, giving, you know, folks tickets, or you got to redo this, oh, geez, you did that. You know, so that's my big concern. I understand the concern of folks wanting to create additional codes and ordinances because that's what they do. But, I mean, I think the impact on the community in general has to be addressed. And you do, and concerned about grandfathering existing things. But that's my only concern, is that there's you know, another level of impactiveness for people to have to deal with.
Oh, sure. That's a great point. And I think we tried to be especially mindful of that when we were crafting the ordinance, and to make sure that it was reasonable, and that in some cases, you know, somebody might call and the inspector might go out and say, you know what, they're doing the best they can, and this installation meets compliance. So.
Because it's interesting relative to wanting to lessen the footprint of light, if you will. The other end of the deal is security. And security is something that's the number one thing all the experts talk about, is enhance the lighting around your house, boom, boom, boom. You know, so you have a cat go in the back of your house and your light goes off. I have one, you know, that does that. The light goes off, and now the neighbor calls the cops, and I'm getting cited for protecting my house.
Commercial properties, not residential.
Correct. Yeah, Mr. Chair, if I could interject, just a couple points of clarity. There's two parts to the ordinance. One is for new installations and or modification of existing installations for commercial properties only. Okay. So a residential installation will not come under review.
Oh, okay. I might have missed that. I apologize.
However, if, and Michelle, correct me if I'm wrong, because I know we have been discussing this
Sure, Jen.
for months and months and months, and I don't remember
Almost
where we ended
a
up
year,
on this.
I think. Yeah.
Light trespass from a residential property to another residential property, are we addressing that in this, or no?
We are not.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
I
So
thought we were
that
addressing.
cleared my whole.
Right,
Yeah.
so
No, it's
the way that
commercial
this is
to
currently-
residential, or to other, like a mixed use or another commercial
Land
property.
development.
Correct. Yes.
Cool.
like
you
a
were talking about-
multifamily
Thank you for
commercial.
that clarification.
Yes.
Very much so. That
Right.
was great.
Does that get rid of
Exactly.
all my
We-
future questions?
We don't seem to have a lot of issues residential to residential. I mean, every once in a while, you get that neighbor that installs a floodlight that shines in their neighbor's window just because they're aggravated, but that isn't the norm. Usually, the complaints come from commercial installations that are spilling onto residential properties.
No wonder you, ooh. No wonder you only showed pictures of the commercial property. Yeah, okay.
With a lot of snow, too, by the way, so you have been working on this for a long time.
I was going to go out and take new pictures, but
It was ominous.
Yeah. Well, there are already things in the law to protect residential, the floodlight scenario. There's still nuisance. There's still, there's still avenues for redress that way.
So, Mr. Chair, on that point, I would say, after this was introduced by Councilman Bullock, we were pretty forthright about it not including residential property because we don't think we can manage it. It's every garage light in the city, it's every backyard patio light, and we don't want to inspect that, frankly. So it would be helpful to have some discussion about that tonight. I mean, does the commission agree with that assessment where the residential lighting would cause issues, or do you feel strongly one way or the other about having that in the ordinance versus not having it in the ordinance?
My personal feeling is that it shouldn't be in the ordinance.
And just for clarification on that, the only way that has been discussed is not to review installations, but only if there is that situation where, it looks like it's a spiteful installation
Yeah.
in order to create that, that glare or flooding onto the abutting property.
And there's already, like Lou said, nuisance ordinances, right, for that.
Common law, too. My thought is walk before you run. The people who can deal with this most are commercial properties and see how it works. And I mean, we're talking about being cutting edge in Ohio at least, and taking on things that are developing. The whole world of fixtures and controls are still developing. It's a different approach. Commercial entities are the ones most readily available or able to respond to that, and actually are more highly regulated in Lakewood. I don't know why you would take on the whole residential piece.
Right. And that's one of the conversations that we had, like, what is the problem that we're trying to fix here?
That's right.
Is it a residential problem? It doesn't appear to be, so.
For my term on the commission, it seems like we've tangentially been dealing with this, or at least the city has, and any new development project, they always talk about the lighting and blah, 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 so.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, that's a requirement of all those new builds. We just run into these weird ones on the existing properties where they do a light fixture install, and it does create a problem. So that's what we've been trying to address.
And it seems like, at least in a lot of the examples that were shown, it's a simple solution, right? Like, it's shading of a certain part of the fixture, where the glare is going a certain way, or it's directional. So it doesn't sound like this is an incredible capital ask. It's more so tinkering with fixtures. So, I mean, and to echo the rest of the commission, I do think with other remedies available for residential property owners, I don't think it makes sense to regulate that many different residential property owners. But I think for commercial properties, and that, properties which I assume apartments would be kind of in that zone, big parking lots, it makes sense to make sure that their life isn't trespassing on abutting residential property. So I think it's good.
Michelle, I think that's a wonderful job you guys did on this.
thank you. I appreciate it. We've all worked really hard on it. Jen's worked really hard, too.
Will you send it to us? I'm actually having a lighting issue at one of the parks in Fairview Park. Yeah, this would be perfect.
Yes, we can send it to you.
It raises a broader question. From a total land use standpoint, our biggest lighting is our street lighting, right? So, this is commercial by commercial, or a few areas, or we talk about historic lighting and everything, but we have the total balance there of safety with glare, that we deal with in all our streets. And so this is obviously not going to address that, right? They would be exempt as a
Correct,
utility.
that isn't going to address that, but there is actually a system in place, I guess, where if there is a specific complaint about a specific street light, that we can call First Energy, and they will come out and shield that light to take care of that. So, you know, moving forward, that is something that we've talked about looking at in the future, but again, baby steps, let's do one thing at a time.
I have one right at the right at my driveway. As a matter of fact, my wife introduced our car to the pole once.
We wanted to make sure it was well lit for her,
But anyhow,
so that she didn't miss it again.
I told her, I says, well, we could get that shielded or movable car. No, it's great security. And that's also my reason why I don't have to take my flag down every night, because it is
It's lit.
You know, so. Very good. Any other questions or discussion from the board?
Well,
Planning Commission?
question, I mean, what is the action requested tonight?
Receive and
Motion to
file.
receive.
Just receive and file, so, I mean, this, as the planning commission, don't we have to, aren't we charged with taking some action, or is that
Not
time
really,
passed,
because this
or-
is in the building code, so it does not affect the zoning code. So zoning code is automatic referral. I mean, certainly if you have comments or questions and you want to direct those to either planning or law department, we absolutely will take a look at those. It has been extensively reviewed through Housing Committee.
Yes, Housing Committee, it's been read several times, and then we're going to ABR next week, so.
So, but we definitely would be open to any feedback and, you know, are listening to your comments and questions.
So
But no action's
unlike other,
required.
okay, so no, other than receive and file.
Correct.
So we're not commenting on, it's not something we're supposed to recommend and then council takes
Correct.
action on a referral like that. This is just informative. Okay.
So you comfortable with it?
I'm comfortable with it.
I have another question. So this is more about enforcing lighting requirements, but so the ABR, they currently evaluate lighting, right? But
They
this is
do.
This is just the piece that's enforcing it.
Yeah, along with the city architect, those lighting plan reviews go through Mike Malinsky, he reviews those. But this also adds some extra teeth, because right now, if there's a parking lot that is just being used as a parking lot and they change the lighting installation and it affects the neighboring properties, that's going to require a plan review, a lighting plan review, where currently it does not. Because they're not changing the use or of the,
I could see people going out at night and replacing the bulbs without any.
we're gonna watch them. No.
You change them during the day, nobody notices.
There you go.
Very good. Well, then, I would like to make a motion to receive and file.
I'll second.
All for it?
Aye.
All against? Motion to adjourn?
Second?